Hello, BookTube. It's time to put down the gauntlet. Time to fight. We're in the midst of Hall Wars. There's been many other perpetrators, and they've had their attack. Now it's my turn to retaliate in kind. You know the drill. I have a book haul here. A brand new book haul. I knew I had more in the arsenal, and I knew that I could attack. I'm not going down. I am not losing this Hall War. So I'm going to show you the books that I got. Most of them are nonfiction with a very particular theme this time around. I only got 2 fiction books, but they were the actual finds of the day, so I'm going to show them last. So you can suffer through all the nonfiction before we get to the only type of books most people even care about, which is the fiction books. I think I'm going to go through the theme second to last. So let's go through this stack first. We start with an Oxford introduction book from their series, the Oxford Very Short Introduction series. And this is their book on happiness. Maybe I should put it here. On happiness. And it's by Daniel M. Hebron. And it's just a short work on what happiness is, maybe how you can quantify it, if it's possible to even quantify happiness, or how people think about happiness, and just a short reflection on it. And I think that's an interesting topic, so I picked it up for very cheap. Next is an actual classic. This is the only classic I believe I picked up, maybe with one exception. And this is Cassius Dio, The Roman History, and it's The Reign of Augustus. So I don't know if we have any more of Cassius Dio. I don't actually know very much about Cassius Dio as an author. All that I know that I've heard of him, and so I picked up this Penguin Classic when I found this Penguin edition. It's translated by Ian Scott Kilvert with an introduction by John Carter, but I'm sure he's not from Mars. And then continuing that classical theme a little bit, this is The World of Odysseus by M.I. Finley. Or is it M.L.? I think it's M.I. Finley. And then there's an introduction by Bernard Knox. And this is a work of classical scholarship, republished by New York Review of Books. And Finley is a classical scholar, or was a classical scholar, and this is one of their reprints of one of his books, where I think it's analyzing the whole age of, a concise and penetrating account of the society that gave birth to the Iliad and the Odyssey. So, the archaic Greek age when these stories gave birth. So, I'm glad to have this. This is actually my second ever New York Review of Books classic. I don't have any other copy except for one. I think I have an Edmund Wilson book of theirs that I have not read. But none of their books really interest me, and then when they do, they're too expensive. Like, I've wanted they have 2 books by L.P. Hartley, and I ended up buying the same books that they publish, but in different editions, because the New York Review of Books was too expensive. And I found this one used for cheap, so I picked that one up. I think I'll skip this one. I don't know if this one is all that interesting. Well, I'll show it. It's Writing History, a Guide for Canadian Students. It's just a short guide on Canadian history students on how to write an actual history paper with research and how to write a research essay. And I don't need this for myself. I know how to write a research essay. It's just for me, to help me if I want to end up actually teaching how to write history essay to students, though I wouldn't be teaching university students. I'd be gearing my teaching towards high school students who do not know how to write paragraphs these days anymore. And then next we have a hardcover of a book on food. This is In Defense of Food, An Eater's Manifesto by Michael Pollan. He's the author of the Omnivore's Dilemma. I think it's, the Omnivore's Dilemma, which I have a copy of. I just haven't read it yet. But I really do like these books on food that are not dumb and not trying to be sensationalist. And this is a book about the heading here, which is bound up here. It's eat food, not too much, mostly plants, and that's the Eater's Manifesto that he's gonna be analyzing in this very short work. It's like 200 pages, so that should be a quick read. Then we get to another book on education. This is Theorizing Historical Consciousness, edited by Peter Ciaxis, and it's just a collection of essays by scholars writing about historical education in schools. And it's just got all kinds of different essays about historiographies and historical consciousness, history education and historical consciousness, and then the politics of historical consciousness. Peter Ciaxis is probably one of my favorite thinkers on the topic of history education, and I really do like his stuff. So even though I don't really know what to think of this volume, I figured I'd give it a go. Depends on how much theorizing is in here and how much I'll actually get out of it. Then we get to another book on education. This is Pedagogy of Freedom by Paulo Freire. This is a Brazilian author. I just can't seem to get rid of that light over my shoulder, so I'll see if you can see that here. A Brazilian author who wrote The Pedagogy of the Oppressed, which is probably one of the most influential books in education in the past 50 years. And this is one of his other books. He wrote a number of other books. I don't have any of them except for this one now, other than Pedagogy of the Oppressed, of course. But and he is one of the most important, like I said, one of the most important education writers in the past 50 years, except for the problem is I very much disagree with his approach to education, which puts me at odds against the mainstream. So, but I do want to collect his books and give him a read and actually see what he's actually advocating for through his own words. And I guess I should say this book is translated by Patrick Clark. And then this book was actually lovingly read and annotated by someone. See if I can give you an example of that here. They wrote in pen in the margins and they underlined occasionally. Not enough to be obnoxious, but just enough to know that there was a reader, that their presence is there. So, and looks like they were very enthusiastic. It's basic. Paulo Freire was basically advocating for a kind of social justice education, very particular kind, and that has really taken over the mainstream. And I have a lot of problems with his approach, which I'm not going to go into here. But we'll see. Maybe if I actually read his words, maybe I'll change my mind. I'm open to that, but we'll see. Next is, it's a book by a woman. The Story of Stuff by Annie Leonard. Annie Leonard, The Story of Stuff. And the subtitle here is The Impact of Overconsumption on the Planet, Our Communities, and Our Health, and How We Can Make It Better. And it's a book about consumption, and you can see the process here. So we have our extract our natural resources, they're processed, they go to the grocery store or to any kind of store, and then they go to our homes, and then the waste is processed again. And so I think that's what she's trying to go with in this volume. The chapters are divided into Chapter 1, Extraction, Chapter 2, Production, Chapter 3, Distribution, Chapter 4, Consumption, Chapter 5, Disposal, and then a couple of appendices. And I've never heard of this author or anything before, but the author looks like to be more or less just an advocate, like an activist, not any kind of scholar or any kind of journalist or anything. because all it says is that Annie Leonard is the creator of the internet film The Story of Stuff and an expert in international sustainability and environmental issues. So that's all they give for the author blurb here. But the interesting thing is, when I was going through this volume, is the front piece here. The Story of Stuff. It actually gives a with here. So there's Annie Leonard with Arian Conrad. Arian Conrad, who does not get any kind of blurb at all mentioned on the cover, is mentioned on the front page as a co-writer or co-author or some kind of collaborator, which got me suspicious, made me think of how much of this book did Annie Leonard actually write, unless Arian Conrad, unless she was like a research assistant that did a lot of the heavy lifting in that area. Arian Conrad. So I don't know. We'll see. Probably doesn't matter either way. And then the next book here is a book that I'm not entirely sure what to think about. I've heard of it before, and so I was pleased to find it, but I'm not entirely sure what to expect in this volume, and it's Darwinian Fairy Tales by David Stove. And then the subtitle here is Selfish Genes, the Errors of Heredity, and Other Fables of Evolution. So I don't know. When I heard of this, I was not given the impression that it was like anti-evolution. It was just more like the overreach of theorizing about evolution, and that's what my understanding is. So let's see here on the back. It's written by a philosopher, so maybe that will get your hackles up right away. But it says it's his hilarious and razor-sharp inquiry into Charles Darwin's theory of evolution. It says he's no proponent of intelligent design. He's a man of no religion, a theological skeptic who admits Darwin's great genius and acknowledges that the theory of natural selection is the most successful biological theory in history. But Stove also thinks that Darwinism, is one of the most overblown contemporary scientific dogmas. He provides a penetrating inventory into the unbelievable claims of Darwinism, from its classical formulation in the 19th century through contemporary variations of neo-Darwinianists, such as E.O. Wilson and Richard Dawkins. And then there's a number of examples here. Like, every organism has as many descendants as it can. In every species, child mortality, that is, the proportion of live births which die before reproductive age, is extremely high. I don't know, it just goes through all these different claims. So it looks like he thinks there's like a Darwinian overreach, I guess, in a lot of its claims, or some of its claims. Though he claims not to be a creationist, so I'm willing to give a skeptic a try, and see what I think of it. See what a philosopher can actually talk about when he's dancing on the realms of biology. We'll see. It could be promising, it could be just junk, so if it is junk, I'll just get rid of it. But I'm willing to hear him out, at least for a bit. Now we move into the theme for today, which is going to be a little bit ironic considering the Darwinian skepticism in that book there. But I promise it's not a theme that is indicative of my own belief system. The first is just a regular book on the Middle Ages, a book that I've heard about before, but I've never really given all that much thought to. But once I found it for 60 cents, I figured that I couldn't. It doesn't hurt to give it a try. It's The Cheese and the Worms by Carlo Ginzburg. Carlo Ginzburg, The Worm and the Cheese and the Worms, and the subtitle here is The Cosmos of a 16th Century Miller. And it's just a short study of this particular case of a miller known as Menechio. Yeah, uses the trial cases of Domenico Scandella, a miller known as Menechio, and it's just documenting the life of this miller who was trialed by the Inquisition at the time of his in his life, and it's just looking at his beliefs, his surprising literary ability, and just documenting a man of his time, really. And I'm big into medieval, early modern works, and this fits right into that. But I've always been skeptical of very narrow histories like that. Like, I'm not interested so much in extremely narrow, except for if they're about individuals like this. So I don't know. I'm because there's limitations to what you can draw from a narrow history of a single person. There's going to be a lot of particularities of this guy's life that you cannot draw um, interesting conclusions from, other than what is very specific to his life. But yeah, and I should say this work is translated by John and Anne Tedeschi. John and Anne Tedeschi translate this volume. So that's the one sort of medieval or early modern work that I have. The rest is a theme. So I have probably 6 or 7 books here that are all on a particular theme. So the first book here is Documents in Early Christian Thought. By editor is Maurice Wiles and Mark Santer. Maurice Wiles and Mark Santer. This is a short volume by Cambridge University Press of just a collection of writings from early church fathers. So right after the Christian canon had sort of more or less been written, we get a whole bunch of early church fathers who were writing about the church and about church doctrine and having all kinds of different ideas about what is orthodox and what is not. And this volume collects some of that writing in under certain headings. So we have God, Trinity, Christ, Holy Spirit, sin and grace, tradition and scripture, church, sacraments, Christian living, church and society, and then the final goal. And it's got authors like Rufinus, Gregory of Nicaea, Tertullian, Irenaeus, Clement of Alexandria, and Dionysius of Alexandria, even some Saint Augustine, and some Eusebius, some Origen, just some basic names. Like, these are some classical names from that period, from early church father period. And I've been looking for an anthology collecting some of their works, and this is one that I found. It's I guess shorter than what I hoped for. I know there's other anthologies sort of like this, but this one is one that I found used, so I was willing to pick it up. And if I don't end up liking this, then maybe I can hopefully find a one with a little bit more in it. I would like a longer one. But that's a theme, because the next book that I have, all the rest of the books I have are all religion based or Christianity based. And the next one I have is the Protestant Reformation. It's another anthology. This is edited by Hans J. Hildebrand. I've actually read one of his books before. He has a brief history of Christianity. I think he calls it a new history of Christianity, and it's like 400 pages. I had to read it as a textbook for a class in university, and so this is his edited volume of works from the Protestant Reformation. So of course it's got Luther, but then it's got Zwingli, a lot of other names here that I don't recognize, but it's also got Calvin and Tyndale, and it's just another fairly short thing. But I believe this work has been edited many times. It's got like 7 editions now or something, and I'm certain it's probably twice as long. But this is the first edition from the 60s, and I figured that I don't know if I would ever read a volume like this from front to back. I'd just pick and choose, because when I read about the Reformation, there's stuff in here that I wouldn't be able to get in either a full volume or any kind of, or that has not been translated in any other volume. So I figured that this would be a good book to dip in and out when I'm reading up on the Protestant Reformation, which I plan to do because I have a lot of books on the subject. Um, then we move on to a work of actual theology, but it's a very weird type of book on theology. It's Introducing Radical Orthodoxy by James K.A. Smith, and the subtitle here is Mapping a Post-Secular Theology. And it's a bit weird because James K.A. Smith is not your traditional theologian. A lot of his ideas, I guess, are a little bit more postmodern-esque, and yet he's considered firmly within the Orthodox tradition, at least Orthodox, not Eastern Orthodox, sorry, more of like a Presbyterian Calvinist tradition, but yet he's mapping a post-secular theology. He's got books on postmodernism and relativism and stuff like that. And he's also got books like on cultural commentary. I just find him an interesting thinker because I think he's a philosophy professor. Yeah, he's a philosophy professor. And he does works on theology as well. So I found an early book by him. This is, 2006? So I figured I'd pick it up because this book brand new is like $40 or something. And I found it for 80 cents. So there's no going wrong there. If I don't end up enjoying it, or if I think that it's just not my cup of tea, I can always get rid of it. Next is a weird book, a book that I've never heard of before, and it's God and the Reach of Reason. C.S. Lewis, David Hume, and Bertrand Russell by Eric Wellenberg. It's a study of C.S. Lewis, David Hume, and Bertrand Russell. So if you're not familiar, C.S. Lewis is probably the most popular Christian apologist from the 20th century, maybe, or at least the most famous, enduring one. A lot of his works, or most of his works, are still in print, and then we have David Hume, who's the 18th century Scottish skeptic, and then you got Bertrand Russell, who's the 20th century British skeptic, and this Eric Wellenberg brings these three together in like a dialogue of sorts. He says this book puts these three intellectual giants in conversation with one another to shed light on some of life's most difficult yet important questions. And the thing is, I don't actually know what perspective this author is taking, because this is published by Cambridge, and this author's from a philosophy department from DePauw University, and I don't know if that's like a religious university or not. And then he's got a previous book called Value and Virtue in a Godless Universe. So does that mean that he's not religious? Then why else does he bring out a book like this? But I don't know. I figured it's interesting because I like C.S. Lewis, and I like Bertrand Russell, and I haven't read enough about David Hume to know if I like him or not. But it's interesting to bring out those three in conversation of sorts. So that is that book. Then we have Vain, 3 more books that are all on the subject of Christianity, but they're all on the topic of one guy, and it's Thomas Aquinas. This is a book on Aquinas. This is by Ralph McInerney. I can't say that. McInerney. Ralph McInerney. And it's just a big eyeball on the cover there, but it's a series called Classical Thinkers, and it's just a book on Aquinas, a short book on Thomas Aquinas. And it's just an accessible introduction to the thought of Thomas Aquinas, and his theology and his philosophy. by this author. And the next book I have is by the same author, Ralph McInerney, and it's a study of the moral philosophy of Thomas Aquinas. It's called Ethica Thomestica, and again, another short work. And an interesting thing for me, or one of the pulls why I grabbed this one, is that there's a blurb here, right here, by Alasdair MacIntyre. I just recently finished reading his book After Virtue, and and he's a Thomist convert. If you don't know what that is, that means he's a follower of Thomas Aquinas and his philosophical viewpoints, at least from what we can understand from reading Thomas Aquinas. And then speaking of Thomas Aquinas himself, I actually have a anthology volume of Thomas Aquinas. This is On Human Nature. This is a Hackett edition, edited by Thomas S. Hibbs. And Hackett is a reprint line, or a print line that's puts out these anthology type volumes for schools. They're cheap and they're very bland looking usually. And this is their volume, or one of their volumes that they put out on Thomas Aquinas, particularly on the subject of human nature. And it's taking selections from Thomas Aquinas' a commentary on Aristotle's De Anima. Aristotle's De Anima. This is my copy of Aristotle's De Anima. On the Soul is the English translation, On the Soul. And Thomas Aquinas did a commentary on there, and so there's selections from that commentary in here, plus from his Summa Theologica. And the reason why I picked these types of volumes up, at least for Thomas Aquinas, is because there's no way I'm reading his Summa Theologica from front to back. That is way too long, and Thomas Aquinas is known to be an just incredibly dull author, though he is incredibly smart and incredibly well-read. So I would rather deal with the 260 pages that this volume puts together of Thomas Aquinas' stuff, rather than actually read a full version, which I actually do have. I actually have his entire Summa Theologica as an ebook, because one of the translations done of that work has entered the public domain, so I actually have the whole thing. But the whole thing is like 3,000 pages, maybe more. It's just crazy how long it is. And then like a work like the commentary on the De Anima wouldn't be available in a cheap volume in a rather modern translation. I think this is a modern translation, unless this is just taking what kind of translation this is. The copyright just says 1999, so I assume the translation here is either from the editor or whatever. I'm not entirely sure. Doesn't tell me. So that's Thomas Aquinas, and that's it for my nonfiction. That's not it for the book haul, though, because I mentioned at the very beginning that I have 2 works of fiction that were the highlights of my book haul, and so I'm going to show you. The first one is a novel called Rich Boy by Sharon Pomerantz. Sharon Pomerantz, Rich Boy. And this, if you're not aware, is a novel from 2010-ish, and if you go into a certain blog by a influencer who wrote a blog back in 2010 called Steve Reads, and you look for the post that says the honorable mentions from the year 2010, this novel makes it in the honorable mentions for best books of the year. Rich Boy by Sharon Pomerantz, and I found a nice hardcover of the book. And the most interesting thing about this volume is that not only is it a first edition hardcover, which usually I don't care about, but it's also signed by the author from 2011, though the book itself was 2010, published in 2010. And so I got an autograph copy. It actually had an obnoxious sticker in the corner that said it was an autograph copy, but I don't care either way. I'm gonna read it and treat it like a normal book, and I'm just glad to actually find a copy, though I think I prefer the paperback cover. This one is just like a blurred photograph. The paperback actually had like a shiny pair of dress shoes that I think actually looked a little bit better. And this novel is considered, it was compared to the type of books that are like not Robert Fitzgerald, F. Scott Fitzgerald, his Gatsby, The Great Gatsby, The Adventures of Augie March, and then The Bonfire of the Vanities. All books that I have either not read or I've heard about but I have not read, except for Gatsby. I've read Gatsby. But it's along that line about a rich family life or something like that. But yeah, it's a novel, relatively contemporary novel, and I'm very glad to find that, and it just happened to be a autographed edition. So, and then the next book is the find of the day, the absolute find of the day. I'm very, very glad to have this, and I might even read it this year, depending on how my reading goes. And it's the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy by Douglas Adams, and it's all 5 books in one volume. A hardcover of all 5 books in one volume. The 5 books are The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, which I have individually as a mass market, but the rest of the series I don't have in any edition. The second book, The Restaurant at the End of the Universe. The third book is Life, the Universe, and Everything. The fourth book is So Long and Thanks for All the Fish, and then the last book is Mostly Harmless. And it's just an omnibus of the entire thing. It calls it a trilogy in 5 parts, which I'm not entirely sure what that means. But it's a complete edition, and I've seen at bookstores, like retail bookstores, I've seen a paperback volume of this exact work, where it's got all 5 books in one volume, and it's like $30-$40 for the entire thing, which I'm not willing to pay. But I'm willing to pay the, what was it, $2 that I paid for this hardcover. It's a worn hardcover, means that it's been loved before, but it's not in bad shape at all. It's perfectly readable, which is exactly what I'm looking for. And I'm very, very glad to have this. And yeah, that's The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. I've heard that this is a great series, so if I end up liking the first book, I can always continue. But yeah, that's my book haul. I challenge you to respond in kind, or else I declare victory, triumph here in BookTube land. Thanks, BookTube, and I'll see you in the next in the next video, and hopefully I can declare victory.